Hi everyone, welcome to Watercolor Wednesday. I am Bonnie Krebs, creator of Watercolor the Art Impressions Way. And this week's project is a really fun one, 4 little cactuses in a row. And I've used really bright colors, I think, because we're in the middle of winter. And it just inspired me to think of something bright and sunny. And so I've done this little painting with these little cactuses. Super easy to do. And remember, you can also change this out. So you could use any type of flowers, you know, florals, blooms, grasses in here. So just a fun idea of putting things in a row like this. This is one pot, just one stamp, and I've used it 4 times. So you can see adding the different colors to it totally changes it. So we're going to get started here on this fun little project. And I've used, because I've used cactuses, I've used the 2 desert sets. So this one is called Desert Set. This is the newest, one of our newer releases. This one is called Southwest. This is a previous release, but I'm going to use a couple of things from here. This one and this one. And then in this one, I'm going to use this cactus here and this taller one here. And then I'm going to use in the small container set, just this one right here, this little pot. And then one little bloom from the flower set. So this is the basic flower set. I'm just gonna use one tiny little bloom from here. So if you don't have this set, you can use a bloom from any set, or you could just leave it off too. So what I've done is I've started out with my watercolor paper. I've drawn a straight line here so that I can see how to line up those little pots. And I want them all to be in a row, and you know, you can make as many as you want. I've made 4, but you can, you know, obviously make a huge long row of them. Super fun. So I'm going to start out by inking this little pot, and I'm going to ink it in 2 colors. So a dark blue and the dark brown. And I'm just going to ink the stamp with the dark brown first and then the blue over the top. So these 2 colors, and then I'm going to stamp it off because I don't want it too dark. So I'm going to ink it in the brown first, whole thing. Go back over it with the blue, just like that. And I am going to use my positioner because obviously I want to get these in a straight row. So I'm going to stamp this now into the corner, just like that, and position it right here. Actually, let's just start over on this side. Make sure that's straight. Place this back and stamp that into the corner. And actually I can get probably all 4 of these just by huffing on it and lightly stamping them all next to each other. I think I can get all 4 without re-inking. Just be sure to huff on it. Don't ink it or press too hard. And there we go. We've got all 4 of them on there. And that's a good start. So we're going to start out now by adding a little water to those. So we're going to pull the color out of the lines. And I'm just going to do that with my brush, dip my brush in water and pinch it off. Remember to always do that. And you can see that these 4 pots are all contours, so that means they're rounded. And so we want to see that highlight in the center. So always keep that in mind. And these are going to be pretty light because, you know, I've stamped them off, and of course I've stamped them 4 times, so there's not a ton of ink on here. And the reason I did that too is because I'm going to use some pretty light colors on them. So I'm pulling this color out from the sides, and you can see it's changing it a little bit, making it look more like a watercolor. It's kind of blurring the lines. And then drag that color out from the side. Okay, that looks pretty good. That's a good start. So now we're going to add the cactus that goes inside. And I'm going to start out with this little one. And I'm going to use my positioner. And I'm going to ink this in a dark green. Doesn't really matter which one. I'm just going to ink that up. Place this now into the corner so that I can see exactly where this is going to go. And I think I'm going to turn it a little bit. I want to be sure to leave enough space to add things into the other pot. So I think I'm going to turn it a little bit and pull it off to the side. And you can see it's hanging over a little bit. So I'm going to place my positioner right there, and I'm just going to rub off the bottom. And this time I'm going to ink it again. I want to make sure that I get enough color on here. And we've got our first little cactus in there. So let's go on to the next one. So I'm going to add this guy now, and you can see I don't need this whole thing. Obviously that would be way too long in here. So I'm just going to use this part here, and I'm not going to ink this little limb or branch here. I'm just going to ink this area. So, you know, with stamping, that's the great thing about it. And I know I say this over and over again, but sometimes we forget. You can use just parts of the stamp. You don't have to use the whole thing. So they're super, super versatile. So I'm just inking this part here. And I'm going to use my positioner again. This little thing is so handy. And, you know, I'm using all four corners before I clean it off. So that's another thing. You can just keep turning it. And there's my little cactus. So I'm just going to place it in here just like that. Place this back over here. And I'm going to ink this one up again too. And I'm just using a dark green. Really doesn't matter which one. Just use a dark green. Place this back in here. And we've got our second one in. And you can see I stamped over the line a little bit. Never worry about stuff like this. This can totally be washed out. So don't worry if you ink over the edge a little bit. It's perfectly fine. So now we're going to go on to the next one. And you can see this stamp is pretty wide. Obviously it's too wide for this little pot. So I'm only going to use part. So I'm going to use this section right here, just these 4 lines. I'm going to use that part, and that will fit just perfectly in that little pot. So again, we're just going to ink the parts that we want. So now I'm using my positioner again. I'm going to use another dark green and just this section right here. Stamp that in here just like this. And now I can tell exactly where that's going. Perfect. And now I've got my little cactus in there. So one left to go, and that's this little guy. And I'm going to ink this one in multiple colors. So I'm going to start out with the dark green. This is the dark green here. Just going to ink this. And I want to make sure I don't ink. This is a pretty long stamp, and I'm going to move it around a little bit. So I want to make sure I don't stamp too much over that pot. I don't want a lot on it. So I'm just going to use some Post-it tape. And I can just cover it like that. So I'm going to use the dark green first. And then I've got a really, really bright green. And I'm just going to ink it over the top. Maybe a little more bright. And then maybe some dark. So I'm getting a good mix of green in here. Maybe just a little bit more over to the side. That looks perfect. And now I can take my little Post-it note off, and I've got my little cactuses in here. So let's get going on coloring these, and dipping my brush in water again. And I'm going to start over on this side. So I'm going to look at the contour of these. So you can see these are all rounded, and the light would be coming down from the bottom. So always keep that in mind. When you don't leave a highlight, these things are flat. So you want to always be sure to leave that highlight. Never really try not to color everything in solid. So take your time and just think about the light coming straight down. So that would be at the top, and always leaving a highlight in the center. And you can see that that already makes that look more rounded. So I'm going to add some of this bright green now to my palette. And I'm going to dip my brush in water and just add a little more color here. Just to really brighten it up. I picked the brightest green I could find. And I just love this color so much. You know, and I don't know if this is the actual color of this cactus, but I don't think it matters. We can color it whatever color we want. Okay, so now moving on to this one. You see all the lines in here? You want to stay within those lines. So you want to actually just pull that color to the side. And again, these are all contours in here. So we want to see these ridges. So kind of try to stay within these sections as you're pulling this color out. Always leave a highlight on the top. So you never want to add ink all the way to the top. Leave that highlight on the top. And then I'm just going to dip my brush and just wash out this little area here. Little extra lines. And I'm going to add some of this dark color now to my palette. And this is, definitely a contour. So we want to make sure that the sides, the edges are darker than the center. So I'm just adding a little bit more color to the outside edge. Make sure that we can see that this is round. And especially underneath, where that light is coming down, underneath here is going to be the darkest. That little shadow in there. That looks pretty good. Okay, let's move on to this little guy. And I'm just dragging this color again, staying in the sections, each section, and just pulling that color out. I'm going to add a little more of this bright color in here too. It doesn't take a lot. And then we're going to add that cute little flower on top too. So I'm going to wash out these lines too, where I kind of stamped over the top. And this little guy here, this one's super easy. We're just going to dab at this. Just dab at all of this. It'll just kind of fade out and look like a watercolor. Okay, that looks good. So now let's move on to the pots. And this is the fun part. And we're going to just pick those bright colors again. So I'm going to add a little more of this bright green. And some bright blue. This is the number 526, very bright blue. And an orange. This is number 925. This is a bright orange. And then a yellow. So a bright yellow. And we can start applying this color. So remember the highlight when you go to apply the color. Let's start over on this side and apply this green. So we're going to start out by applying the green to the edge, always to the edge first where it's the darkest. So if the center is the lightest, the edge, the outside edge is going to be the darkest. And I'm just going to drag that color over. And just pull it over, make sure you're showing that highlight on there. And then just go back over it. And get those edges really dark. And under here, this is a little overhang under here. So that's going to be pretty dark. And just blend it out. If you see that you've got, these harsh lines on here, just blend it out. Dip your brush in water and just blend it out. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Let's do this orange. Actually, let's do the yellow. Love this yellow. So we're going to do the yellow, same way. And you can see why it's important to start with these light, very light. If you're going to make them kind of old and rustic, you can, the ink can be darker when you start. So in other words, you don't necessarily have to stamp it off. But when we're coloring it with these bright, bright colors, we don't want too much color in here to start. Okay, so I've got this guy colored in. And let's move over to the next one. That's the blue. Start out on the side. They're all the same. They're all the same. And I think it would be really fun to change these out, do some really pretty florals, or maybe just some greens. Just some vines, some grasses. These things don't have to take a long time. They can be really, really simple. And something like this, just a simple little border, you can whip this out pretty quickly. And honestly, it doesn't matter what you put in these pots. Anything is going to be cute, especially when you're using these bright, bright colors. A little dark line in there. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Orange. Love this color. ink the sides, place the color onto the side and drag it to the center. That's really all there is to it. Drag it to the center. And it's you know, it takes a couple of passes. You know, especially these colors like this orange, you want to get another coat on there, and the more passes that you make, the brighter it is. And just drag that over. A little darker color under here. And we can actually use a little bit of this orange to really darken these edges on the yellow too. Kind of fun. And taking a little bit of this darker green too, and doing the same thing to this pot. Adding just a little bit. And when you mix the color like that, I think that adds a lot. Don't be afraid to do that. Okay, so we can add some detail if you want to. This is totally up to you, but we can kind of make these look a little more Southwest. And I can do that with my fine tip. So this is just my dark green. And I'm just gonna put a little detail on here like that. Maybe on this one, we make something like this, just using my fine tip. And maybe on the blue, maybe just a line across here. And maybe one more on this one. And I'm just using a purple here, but you can use whatever color you would like. And I'm just gonna take my blue now, my dark blue, and just kind of make a little line behind here so that you can kind of see the back of the pot. And just put a little bit under the lip here too. Okay, that looks good. So now the next part is totally up to you. I always like to add a little bit more to the background by pulling the color outside of the lines. So this is just totally optional if you like to do this. I think it adds a lot, and I think it makes it a little more whimsical looking. And you just drag this color to the outside. Just pull it out a little bit. Don't overdo it, but just drag this color. It sort of blends it out, fades it out, gives it a little background. And then I'm going to now just erase my lines. This line under here, take this off. And just put a little shadow underneath. And I'm just going to use this dark blue. And there are lots of ways to do a shadow. One of the easiest ways is just little strokes. Just put a bunch of little strokes down in here. Just like that. One more thing, let's put that little flower on. And we are about finished with this project. So let's make a little area on here. Of course, I'm going to use my positioner. You could guess on this, but after all this work, I would probably use the positioner just to make sure. And there's this little guy right here. And I'm going to ink it again just because I want to make sure that's really dark. Place that in the corner. And we've got that little guy ready to go. Let's add a little water to it. And that is it. One thing left to do, sign and date. And now I'm writing 2020. I'm gonna have to get used to that one. Thank you so much for watching. Put this on a card or put it in a frame, give it away to someone. You're gonna make their day. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it, and I'll see you all next week.